What's going on? How's your day been?
My day's been really good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's your week looking like?
It's a busy week. Well, we have 2 baptisms today, and I'm really excited about that. A couple
that'll be great.
that I've been working with is being baptized today, and that's always an exciting day. And it's been interesting. The past several weeks have been that way, where there have been baptisms midweek.
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's really cool.
Yeah,
I don't think people realize that there's more going on throughout the week than just office work. There's baptisms, stuff like that going on. It's exciting.
There's nothing more exciting than to see how Jesus changes people's lives.
Yeah, definitely.
And when that light bulb goes off, and wow, you just see God's power at work right before your very eyes. And I love that. So
yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, it's a good week.
Yeah. Well, you preached. And so now you're on the podcast. Last week it was Mark.
Yes.
The week before that was Mark. And the week before that was Neil. Neil's still on vacation, so you get to be with us. I'm excited about that.
It's good to be here.
Does it feel like more and more you're just back on the radio? Like before it was the 3 of us and you were kind of being interviewed. Now you're co-host. You've been upgraded. Now you're a host of the podcast.
Does it feel different?
I don't know.
This does feel different. It doesn't feel like being on the radio to me. Because when I was on the radio, I was a news anchor. Yeah. And this is
not
very
nearly
different
this relaxed, right?
No, it was not nearly. Much more intense. And we were always living by the clock.
Yeah.
I mean, when that top of the hour ID went off, if you weren't ready, then I mean, you had to be ready to go. And everything we did was by the second. I mean, when we were joining the network, it was by the second.
That's the part that confuses me, because I mean, I'll listen to I don't know, you listen to NPR and there's the local broadcast, but then there's also stuff tied in with national stuff going on, and like how it all ties together and how they coordinate all of that is just, it seems just so like too much. Like that's too much to manage.
Well, you're watching the clock out of the corner of your eye.
Yeah.
And talking at the same time, and then you never know, like, okay, I've got 8 seconds to get this information in. What am I going to say? Or maybe you have 3.
Yeah.
And you have to join it because it's going to start right then and there, and you can't talk over them when they start. So
wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was fun. I enjoyed all of that. It was
you seem like you would really be able to thrive in a very I don't know. I don't think anxious is the right word, but like that, intense, in that kind of intensity. Like you thrive in that.
It was super intense, and I did enjoy that. Yeah, I did enjoy that.
Yeah,
it was interesting. I used to get up at 2:30 in the morning every morning, so I was in bed at 7:00 at night every night.
That's crazy.
And we had, a daughter.
Yeah,
who. Her entire life, that was my thing. I would go to bed at 7 and then get up at 2:30 in the morning. I was at my desk between 3:30 and 4. Wow. And then I went on the air at 5.
Oh, that's so crazy.
So, yeah.
So so you would work from 5, how long would you be on the air for?
5 to 9.
Oh, okay.
Or 5 to 10, depending on what station I was working for.
At what point of the day would you kind of be done with your work day, since you start so early? I'm assuming you get done at noon, 1 o'clock?
I was always out by about 1 or 2. Yeah. Very rarely noon.
Yeah.
Because I was the news director.
Right. So you were in charge.
Right. So that meant that I kind of, I worked with the staff. When 9 o'clock would roll around, we'd have our assignment meeting, and we would decide, where we were going, where we were going to send our reporters. All of that.
Wow.
So
since it was radio, it's not necessarily reporters like you'd see on TV. It's audio. Like people would go and then they'd record audio on location.
Yeah. And then they'd call in their reports from wherever they were, just not with pictures.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. That's crazy. Sometimes we, when 9/11 hit, we would be live continuously.
Oh, goodness,
So
I
it would be
bet.
continuous live coverage
Yeah.
just on the fly.
Right.
So maybe we'd have 5 reporters out at that time, or
Mm-hmm.
3 to 5, or whatever the case may be. We had a lot out on that day.
Yeah. What kind of places did they go?
The airport,
Okay.
because remember,
Yeah.
one of the planes turned around right over Cleveland and
Right.
Cleveland airspace. That's the
Right.
one that landed in Shanksville that
Yeah.
crashed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that turned around over Cleveland. So Cleveland played a very significant role in that whole
Right.
day. Cleveland was in the national news. So
Yeah.
the air traffic controllers from the Cleveland center were the ones that were in communication, with the plane and all of that
Yeah,
day. It was
that's crazy.
just a horrific day. Then we had reporters downtown because they evacuated the Key Tower because there was some concern that the Key Tower was a target.
Right.
So they evacuated the Key Tower and other buildings downtown.
Yeah.
And then we had, someone at Key. We had someone at Tower City. We had someone on Public Square. We had someone doing traffic reports because the traffic getting out of downtown was a nightmare.
Oh, I bet.
When they shut downtown down.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and then Bill Wills and I were on continuously for 13 hours. We went 13 hours straight. So we went on the air at 5 in the morning.
Wow.
And then 13 hours later, we went off, and
Yeah.
then we ran home to get some sleep very quickly. And then we were up and at 'em for the continuous coverage the next day.
So how long did that intense coverage last? Was it a week? Was it,
It was about a week of super intense coverage, as I recall.
Wow. That's crazy.
It
Did
was
that
surreal?
Well, you'd almost feel, I would assume that there's a feeling as someone who's kind of you're a radio journalist basically, and you're covering this, you're in the middle of it. You've got to have this feeling that this is a massively historical moment. So not only is there probably a feeling of responsibility to be available to be doing this, but also you're a part of it. And as someone who kind of, you don't want to say you live for these moments because it's a horrific thing, but for news, this is kind of okay, it's time. We're here. We're ready to go. This is what we do for, so that we can keep people in the loop and stuff. Was there kind of a feeling like that in the middle of it?
This is really interesting that you bring this up, because the answer for me, and I think for our staff, was largely no. You realize it in the back of your mind, but you don't focus on that. You have a job to do, and you have to do your job.
Yeah.
So I think it hit all of us a couple of weeks later.
Really?
That's when we realized the true gravity of everything that we were talking about.
Wow.
But when you're in the middle of it, you really don't have time to think about it, because
Right.
there are so many angles. And in that role, your job is to be calm.
Yeah.
Your job is to not be freaking out. Your
Right.
job is to be, you've got, thousands of people who are coming to you for this information. And if you're freaking out, or you're not presenting it in a very calm way,
Yeah.
I think you do a disservice to it. I think we were called to do our job very professionally, and I'm so proud of the people I worked with back in those days.
Yeah.
That was 2001.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 21 years ago.
Yeah, I just, that team that we had pulled together like no other team that I've ever been with, and I was really with good people all my career.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed working with them. And so
Yeah. It's amazing.
those memories, while that was such a horrific thing, it was a very rewarding thing too.
Yeah. Did you find that kind of going through that together as colleagues, did that kind of build that sense of team even more to go through something so intense?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And we're still close to this day.
Yeah.
It was only a couple of years ago that we all got together as a team at the Hofbrau House, and we rented out a room down there, and we just sat around a gigantic table, all of us, and shared stories. And I hope that we do that again, because that that was
Yeah.
just amazing to me. By that
Yeah.
time, I was in ministry and was no longer
Yeah.
in broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
But to sit back and think that's what I used to do.
Wow.
And all of these great people were a part of it. And,
Yeah.
you know, there was a real love on that staff here in Cleveland. And, you know, so we've all stayed in touch.
That's great.
It's been good.
That's really cool.
It's been really good.
It's interesting. Like I have to imagine, like, so you're responding to this situation that you don't even fully understand yet. Like, how do you manage information in such a quick changing, I guess, situation like that? How do you manage the information that you're sharing? How do you share information? Because, you know, especially speaking of 9/11, you know, the first plane hits, I remember people saying, like, was it a prop plane? Like, people weren't even sure exactly what had happened. And then the second plane hit and it started becoming more clear. So how do you responsibly handle information, but still report? Like, how do you do that?
That's a tough question. You report responsibly the information that you know at the time, knowing that it could all change. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure.
You know, in a case like that, there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah.
And you know that you're going to get some things wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that this is changing. You do the very best that you can possibly do to confirm everything that you're saying.
Yeah.
But you also realize at the same time, with something like that, it's impossible to get it right all the time. And, you know, I'm sure that there are some ways in which we didn't get things right, but I think we were really responsible about it.
Yeah.
And in a fluid situation like that, that's really difficult.
Oh yeah.
Because there's not time to confirm everything.
Right. And do you, since, you know, let's say you're on the air, do you have like another team member who's off the air kind of working to get information and kind of trying to feed you information and stuff as you're on air, or are you kind of doing that while you're talking on the radio? Like, how does that work?
Absolutely. And, you know, we had a traffic cop back in the newsroom pretty much. That was the assistant news director and our assignment editor.
Yeah.
And so we had an intercom system where they could talk in our ear while we were live. And back in the newsroom, there were people that were communicating to the reporters in the field, and they would say, hey, RC, that's what I went by when I was on the air. You know, we've got Greg.
Yeah.
Greg Saber's down at City Hall, and he's ready to do a report. Yeah. So you know that. And so they're talking in your ear while you're talking on the air.
Yeah.
So yes, there was somebody back in the newsroom that was kind of making sure that, you know, we were staying organized and we knew where people were.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of going back to when you were talking about how do you deal with kind of the intensity of the moment while still, you know, trying to do your job, like all this hustle and bustle you're talking about, like there's constantly this person's on location, let's get to them, like that kind of stuff. I'd imagine that just that hustle and bustle of doing your job kind of distracts you from maybe the weightiness of it so much and helps you stay in the moment, stay present, stay professional, all of that. Did you find that you would get off the air, go home, like, would you start kind of processing what it was you were reporting a little bit more, or was it kind of like what you said, weeks until you guys really, really started processing?
It depended on what it was. With that, it was just so huge that I didn't start processing until a couple of weeks later. And we all talked about it and how it was affecting us and some of the emotions that we were feeling. Those were interesting conversations.
Yeah.
Other things, you know, it would be you would process it, you know, that day. Mm-hmm. And I'm not proud of this, but there's a certain you day in and day out, you report so many negative things that happen. And, you know, for the most part, you know, news is often not good. And in order to do that job, there was a distance that you would have to maintain between yourself and the story and not let yourself get emotionally involved in it. Because if you took the time to stop and think about what you were reporting, some of it was just absolutely horrific.
Right.
So, you know, there was that disconnect too.
Yeah.
and a cynicism that I think develops in news people, about life, because they see so many bad things happen.
Yeah. Can you point to any, you're talking about the reality is that you're reporting a lot of negative stuff. And for the most part, it seems like the stuff that's worth mentioning that's going to affect people's lives sometimes is mostly negative, that's disruptive to either, the city, or disruptive to particular lives, or disruptive to, on 9/11, our entire society. Can you point to anything that you remember reporting that was very positive? Is there anything that sticks out that is notable for you in your career of, I had the pleasure of announcing this, or I had the pleasure of getting to share this news?
Oh, Jared, there's so much. I wish I knew that question was coming.
No, that's okay.
That's a hard one. There were a lot of things that were positive. Some of the things that I used to love to cover, the construction of Browns Stadium.
Oh yeah.
The Browns coming back from Baltimore.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things were really fun to me. I love Cleveland, and I loved reporting on stories that were positive about Cleveland. When there was new development and things like that. When the Indians would go to the World Series, now the Guardians, and those were just fun. Those were fun times.
Those were your favorite
Being
ones.
a part of covering those things, it was huge. When the World Series would be here, and how excited the city would become. That was fun. Those were fun things.
That's very cool.
I enjoyed that.
That's awesome.
I really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were very gifted at that. I love having you on the podcast. This is not quite the same like we already talked about, but it's still cool to see you get to be in front of a microphone.
You brought up this idea of just calmly reporting. We were talking about that. It's interesting talking about that, because it would be in crisis situations that I would often find myself the most calm.
Wow.
And that really served me well. And that's the way I tend to be. Yeah. Naturally, it's in the crisis situations. I don't know what it is, but I just, this calm comes over me. It's the little things in life that get under my skin that I have a harder time dealing with personally. Silly things that would bother no one else, but those are the things that will just really bug me. But on 9/11, and it was as if this calm came over, and I don't know if it's whether I knew that I had to be calm, or what it is, but it's like that in other areas of my life too.
Yeah. Did you feel, coming, obviously, you're coming into that really intense day. Obviously, you start your day, and everything shifts around 9:00. When things 8:30, 9:00, when that stuff starts happening on that day. But looking back, do you think there were any points along your career as a radio news individual journalist host that prepared you for the intensity of that day? Or do you think it was just kind of that in the habit? What do you look back at as some building blocks that kind of helped equip you for that day?
Nobody can really be prepared for something like that. That was history in the making. That was a story on the level I had never experienced before. That I wonder sometimes if we lose sight of how historic that moment really was. In my view, it changed the trajectory of our lives to this very day. That moment was a turning point in our lives. That moment was a turning point in our world. And for crying out loud, jet planes hit the two buildings in the world that represent man's, I achievements or whatever it is. I mean, those represented the financial power of the world right there.
Yeah.
And two, how could that have happened?
Right.
It's mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm.
It's that story would be in the Bible if the Bible were written today.
Yeah.
It's of that magnitude. I don't think we realize how much it changed our lives.
Yeah.
And I think we're still experiencing that.
Yeah.
Nothing has ever been the same since 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the wild thing we talk about as a society. I mean, I think we're all really kind of used to the temperature of the water now. We're very used to it, but if we really stop and think about it, we'd all admit everything is different now. And it's crazy to think of, the generation after me who they grew up in it, who were born after, after 2000, 2001, that was 21 years ago. So, I mean, they're adults now, and they've never lived in any other world than post 9/11.
Right.
I'm reminded of it every time I go to the airport, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's different.
It's different.
Everything's different. And for, as much as we don't think about it, I think every single person who gets on an airplane thinks of 9/11, don't they?
Absolutely.
And not like anyone's freaking out or I mean, maybe someone out there is very scared, but I think most of us, it's just this thought, and we don't acknowledge it. We don't really think about it, but, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really, it's crazy how it's changed everything and affected every single person.
I don't think we really realize the significance of that event. And immediately afterward, we saw people running to churches and suddenly getting interested in things of the Lord, things of God.
Yeah. And
the churches filled up, and now here we are, back to life as we knew it, or whatever it is. It's not life as we knew it, but it's, back here we are. We're back in our routines, and how easily we forget the Lord, how easily we forget God. Yeah. And now the churches aren't filled. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking to see that. Yeah.
Well, events like that have a sense, have a way of giving us a sense of urgency about our family and about our relationship with God. People, I can't remember the phrase. It's almost like a tongue-in-cheek thing that, about wartime, but there are no atheists in foxholes. You're in that moment of, my life is about to end, or could very well, I'm in danger. I need safety that's beyond what I can provide for myself. And so you reach out. And I think that's really what was happening. I think there's a very real sense of, well, no one's safe. If this can happen, then it can happen anywhere. If this can happen in New York City, then this can happen anywhere. And there's that sense of real fear, but also just kind of let's cherish our family, let's cherish our lives. And I think kind of that going back to church, that coming back to Jesus moment was real for so many people. I remember that too. And then you kind of slip into the safety of everyday life. And I think it's just life in the world and routine of things of the world lull us back into, I don't know what word to use, but just kind of an indifference towards God, and kind of the safety of thinking I'm going to live forever, so why live with any urgency?
Right. We go back to our idols. Yeah. We go back to the things that replace God in our lives. Yeah. And we don't learn our lessons very well. No. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that was a very interesting topic. I didn't expect us to be talking about 9/11. No. Wow, that was amazing. But I mean, I think it's on topic for what we're talking about. in the sermon series that we just finished up, Summer Storms. But we haven't even introduced ourselves, so maybe we should do that, and then we'll jump in.
Have we?
So yeah, let's do it. All right. Hey, welcome to the Atrium of Hope Christian Church podcast. I'm Jared, creative arts pastor here at Hope Christian Church. And who are you?
I'm Bob Bauer. I'm one of the pastors on staff here.
Now, is Bob short for Roberto? That's your birth name, isn't it?
Robert.
Oh, okay. Not Roberto.
Roberto, no.
Okay. I was hoping that there was a little Latin flair with you, but I guess not.
No, there's a German flair with me.
Ah, there you go. Okay.
Robert Karl Bauer.
Carl. That's
very German.
It would feel very German if it was a K. Or would that be more Russian? I don't know. Anyways, well, it's good to have you here on the podcast. And again, thank you for taking the time out of your day. And thank you for serving us through the Word on Sunday, wrapping up the Summer Storms series. It's interesting. We were randomly talking about 9/11 and stuff, and talking about how in our everyday lives, we're in the habit of turning to, you said the word idols. We turn to our idols instead of turning to the Lord. And so it's no wonder that when we come to these crisis moments of life, the summer storms, we don't know what to do because we're not in the habit of seeking the Lord. We're in the habit of seeking idols and things that are temporal and fleeting. And so you come into a storm of life and you don't know where to turn, because all of a sudden these things that you've been holding on to when the waters were calm no longer sustain you, no longer fulfill you. And so I've just really loved the series of acknowledging that, we are going to go through hard times, and the call from Scripture is not to minimize that or act like it's not as bad as it seems, or, oh, it could be worse. Some people have it worse off. It's not about that. That's not how we manage these times. We manage them by trusting in Jesus, who is the God of the storm. And I love your sermon of the fact that Jesus is not only the God of the storm, but he's the God who he's chill during the storm. Like he's not freaked out by it, and he's not afraid of it. He's sleeping in the boat. So I
love that picture. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. I love that picture specifically because of Jesus being asleep. Yeah. And my heart just longs to have that kind of trust and that kind of faith in the midst of the storm, to really press into that. I think we spend so much time pushing away the storms that God allows in our lives, but they're wonderful opportunities, Jared. I know it's hard to see it that way, and even for me it is, but I so long to want to see it that way, because it's a wonderful opportunity to really put your faith into action. And when we do that, and we lean into our relationship with the Lord, and we do put our faith into action, it builds our confidence that we really indeed do have an authentic faith, and we really are following the Lord, because we know that without him we could have never gotten through it or at this point. And
that's really good.
So I love this story because Jesus wasn't being irresponsible and saying, well, I can't deal with this, so I'm just going to go to sleep.
Right.
That wasn't it at all. He was just so confident that God, the Father, would take care of him. And, Jared, I just love the idea. Our faith is real. This is not a fairy tale thing following Jesus here. This is Jesus is a real person, and he's our Savior and our Lord, and to get to this point where you really do trust him is really where I want to get in life. And I struggle with this. When I was diagnosed with my prostate cancer, I don't want people to think that I'm just saying, oh, just trust Jesus and everything's going to be okay, and this is a really easy thing, and why are you having a problem with this? This is not what I'm saying at all, because I struggle with this. But a big storm in my life was the cancer that I was diagnosed with, and all of the uncertainty that brings. And I have to tell you, when I first learned of it, it wasn't a freak out moment, but I'll tell you, it was scared.
Yeah.
There was fear that came up in me.
Yeah.
It forced me to look at even more the fact that life doesn't go on forever, and all kinds of things were going through my mind, and there was fear and all kinds of questions, but when you ask the Lord to work in you, and you ask Him to change your heart about it, I found that if you ask for something that you know that He wants you to have, He wants us to trust Him more. He wants us to be able to do that. When you, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but you're a parent, and when your child asks for something that is good for them or is going to help them, you don't withhold that. And so I asked God, I told Him, I said, I'm not there. I have this fear. I have all of these questions in my mind. I was making myself crazy by Googling everything on prostate cancer that I could possibly find, and that was only making it worse. And then I just said, this is where I'm at with this. And I really want to have the kind of faith that's just going to relax and just let you be the Lord over this storm. Let you guide me where you're going to guide me and make me okay with it. I'm not there right now, but this is where I want to be, and I need your help with that. And please, help me, and please calm my heart about this, and please increase my faith and help me. And then I started to relax and just not put a timetable on when all of that would happen. And it's amazing what he did. And I'm not saying that I'm like cool with the cancer and all of that, and I think it's a great thing, but I'm praising the Lord that I'm in a place where I'm not having to treat it right now and just doing active surveillance, and that's a blessing. Is it going to have to be treated one day? I don't know, but God got me to this point, and He's giving me one day at a time, and I'm very confident that whatever He allows, He'll be there at that time too, and He'll give me exactly what I need. And I haven't always been there, but I'm increasingly getting there, and it's such a freeing thing. And this is available for everyone. It's just have a normal conversation with God. Tell Him, this is where I'm at. This is I'm mad at you. I'm not down with this. I don't understand why this is happening. Just pour out your heart like King David did in the Psalms, and be honest about it, and ask Him for what you want. And what I wanted is to be able to be peaceful in the midst of all of this, and not become a burden to other people, and not talk about it all the time, so that it's just becoming like this is all that I'm obsessed with. God's there, I have no control over the cells in my body. There is nothing in the world that I can do about that. All the worrying is not going to help. All of the Googling to find out where I'm at on this, or the possibilities of where this could go, is not going to help me, because ultimately God is in control of every cell in my body. This is something that I can't control. And we want to have control over everything, and we have control over nothing. There's nothing in this life that we control. We think we have control, but that's just an illusion. It doesn't exist. So, man, in the last couple of years, it's I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer to it, and as I get closer, to it, and God walks with me through this. I've never felt His presence more in my life than now, and I'm just, that is such a sweet thing, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
So,
that's great.
and it's available for all.
Mm.
We just have to ask.
Yeah.
He's not going to give us a stone if we're asking for bread.
That's good.
You know?
Yeah.
This is praying in line with his will.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So
that's really good.
Anyway.
That's great. Well, is there anything, one of the things that's interesting about, this as a preacher, and, Neil and I've talked about this, but, Mark, Chad, Zach now, we've all kind of been through it, and we understand, like, when you go and present a sermon, that's probably about maybe 5% of all of the content that was behind the scenes ready to go, and you had to kind of cut things away. Was there anything that you thought was really, really good, really, really helpful, but just did not fit with, the Sunday morning that you wish you could have included, but you just really couldn't? Is there anything else that you'd love to talk about in relation to your topic, or was there anything that struck you personally that you didn't get to share on Sunday morning?
To answer that question, on this particular sermon, not a whole lot. There were 5 points in it.
Yeah.
Usually I don't have that many points, and I want to have more points, and I end up having to, whittle down the points.
Right.
But all the points on this one that I wanted to talk about, or I felt that the Lord wanted me to talk about, are in there.
Yeah. So you're able to fit pretty much everything in.
Yeah. In that one, I feel like I can't really think of, unless you want me to go deeper on any of the things that you heard that you thought, maybe we could go deeper on.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything you'd like to, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, it was your sermon. I just enjoy hearing kind of if you have anything extra that you'd like to say. But if you're not, that's okay too.
I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I think that we should. I just see that we spend so much time trying to push the storm out of our life.
Yeah.
And we're so focused on getting the storm out of our life that we don't always, if we're not careful, we can miss the lesson that God's trying to show us in the midst of the storm. And I think that there can be some really profound lessons that we can all learn
that's really
through the storms that God allows.
Yeah.
I think we're so idealistic that we expect everything to go perfectly and life to go smoothly.
Right.
And it in a sinful world like this, in a broken world like this, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
To me, it's more like when you have those periods where everything is going seemingly perfectly or it's going well, those are the more unusual moments. For most of life is a lot of heartbreaking things that happen to us, and I think that we need to really learn to expect that it's going to be that way. And not push it away so much. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. It made me, as you were talking, I just like the picture I had was, when Jesus walks on the water, he sends the disciples off into the boat, and the storm comes upon them, and Jesus comes walking on the water. And it made me think, if they were so focused on getting to shore, they just go right past him and don't even acknowledge him walking on the water. And they're just so desperate to get to shore that they miss him in the storm.
Yeah.
That's kind of a funny picture, but I think that's the temptation that we all face, isn't it? And that's what you're saying, is that, we are so averse to suffering because we don't know how to handle it, and we haven't learned how to handle it, and we crave comfort so deeply that when we come into those times of frustration or storms, and this isn't certainly not to denigrate anyone who, I'm not saying we should enjoy suffering, or look for it or desire it. That's not the point. But that, we live generally comfortable lives, I think broadly stated, generally comfortable lives. And so when we do come into times of suffering, we have not learned how to handle that. And so that's kind of the training ground. That's Jesus sending us into the storm so we can learn how to rely on him in those times of suffering. So we can draw near to him in our suffering, draw near to him, and kind of, you already said it earlier, but this idea of idols, when we're comfortable, when things are good, we have a way of forgetting our need for Jesus, and we start enjoying these idols and putting our turning our hearts towards other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's only in those times of suffering, those times of intense pain and the storms of life that we remember, oh yeah, these things won't last, and these things can't do what I'm asking them to do. There's only Jesus. Only he can meet me in my suffering and in my need. And so, yeah, I it's interesting that you were saying that, because, yeah, I think that's really the temptation, is like we're so bent towards our idols. We're so bent in our sin that even in those times that Jesus is, hey, here's a storm, here's a time to remind you to draw near to me. We are so desperate, like disciples in a boat that are so desperate to get back to shore so we can be back in our comfort and back in, with our chosen idols, that we completely miss Jesus walking on the water. So anyways, I thought that's such an important part of this. That's an important aspect of this, that we're not so quick. Like, is the goal of every storm to get out of the storm for us? Or is the goal to find out where Jesus is in the storm?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Like, is that the goal of storms for us? Is that our priority in the storm? Is your priority to get out of the storm? Or is your priority to find Jesus in the storm? So I think that's kind of a helpful way of thinking about it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then when your priority is finding Jesus in the storm, you do find him in the storm, and then you relax, and you're not so concerned about when the storm is going to end.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of like he was sleeping on a boat.
Right.
Like he wasn't even thinking about the storm. He's sleeping. There's not a better picture of peace and rest than, even Scripture talks about like sleep as something that only comes in peace. If we're anxious, and we all know this, if we're anxious, if we're frustrated, if we're worried, those are things that commonly keep us up at night, that, we have anxious thoughts. And so our mind is racing all night long, thinking about the things that we're worried about or whatever. And then Jesus gives us this picture of himself, just, this is what peace looks like in the middle of the storm, a boat that's rocking and there's water coming over the sides of it, and the people operating the boat think they're going to die, and then he's in the boat and he's asleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
I often am awakened in the middle of the night, and I'm really glad, and I wonder sometimes if that's the Lord having that happen deliberately. Some of my best prayer times are in the middle of the night when I'm anxious about something, and I'm just laying there in bed at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just can't sleep. And those are some of the sweetest times that I can remember, because it's so neat to just enter into prayer right then about what you're anxious about. And I found, at least with me, when I'm in the middle of praying about the things that are causing me anxiety and keeping me awake, I often fall right asleep in the middle of the prayer. And I wonder if God just looks down on us as we look down on our children that are in their cribs or sleeping. And I wonder if that puts a smile on his face when we fall asleep in the middle of a prayer. Yeah. Some of my best times with God are at that time when it's so quiet. And I used to be obsessed. I'm losing my sleep. I've got so much to do today, and I'm only going to have 4 hours of sleep. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't really matter, because God controls my body, and he's going to give me what I need the next day. So if I only get 4 hours of sleep because I'm talking to Jesus, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's been really good, those in the middle of the night prayer time.
Yeah. What advice? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off.
Another thing I think that in the middle of a storm that would be really helpful for people would be to really think about the blessings that they have instead of the storm that they're in. We're all going to be in the middle of storms, but I think what's really been helpful for me too is to look at what do I have, not what don't I have, or why am I in this storm, or all of that. It's like, what has God blessed me with? What are the things that I have instead of what are the things that I don't have?
Yeah.
I have my salvation. I have eternal life. I have my wife. I have my family. I have a roof over my head. I have a hot shower in the morning. I have breakfast on the table. I have a job to go to. I have people that I love working with. I have a family that loves me. I have a God who loves me more. I have a car to drive. I have, what he's blessed us with is incredible, and we get so focused on what we don't have or what we need instead of what we've already been given by him. I mean, he's incredibly gracious with us. We don't deserve a thing from him, and yet he has so abundantly blessed us. And I don't know.
It's really good. Yeah. So shift of perspective is helpful. In terms of what our focus is, isn't it?
Thankfulness.
Thankfulness.
Yeah.
What are some other things? I mean, you just shared personally, like your own walk through a storm that's kind of sort of ongoing.
It is.
And you're learning and you're growing in it. What advice would you give to other people who are kind of walking through that? How, to go back to the metaphor we were just talking about, like how do we look for Jesus in the storm? What are steps we can take? So, being thankful obviously is one. What are some, and you even talked about being honest with God is another way, just being very honest and not dressing up our prayers as if he doesn't actually know what's in our heart anyways, but being very honest with him. But is there anything else you could recommend, or, what's some advice you would give to someone?
Another thing that I would recommend is not to isolate yourself. I think we have a tendency to isolate ourselves in the midst of storms, and we should be doing the very opposite. As we talked about in the message on Sunday, we're part of the church for a reason, and one of those reasons is to be in community with one another, to help one another through the storms. We were never meant to go through this life alone. We were meant to be in relationship with other people, and sometimes I think we withdraw and we don't want to talk about what we're going through because we have this idea that we have to be strong in the midst of the storm, or we have to appear that nothing's wrong and everything is going fine. And we don't want to appear weak. We don't want to appear as if we can't handle something. And I think that's when our pride gets in the way, and then we isolate and we're all alone in the middle of that. And that's not the way it's meant to be. And so I would say, don't isolate. Press into your relationships with your brothers and sisters in the church. And I'm not suggesting that you go and you tell everybody about what it is that you're going through, but just have one or two people maybe that are close to you that could pray with you, that could encourage you, that could listen to you when you just need to vent. I think the venting process can be really helpful. And if you're on the other side of the person who's venting, you don't have to have the answer to what they're talking about. It just listen. I think we feel when we're listening to the other person who's going through the difficult time that we have to have special words of encouragement or a special way to help them or give them the answer to what it all is. And sometimes just by giving them the opportunity to express what's on their heart, they come to what they need on their own without you telling them what they need or telling them how to resolve the situation. Certainly there are times when maybe you could give, a little word of wisdom or something like that from God's word, but I think don't worry about it. Don't be nervous about talking to the person who's going through a difficult time. Just be there to listen. You don't have to. It's up to the Lord to solve the issue. It's up to the Lord to change the heart.
Yeah.
If you're just there, there's something about that relationship, that community that can be so helpful in the healing process. And I think we pull away from that.
That's really good. Yeah, that's great advice. It's huge. I mean, that's one of the primary ways that, Jesus uses us is in each of our lives to reach out to one another and to serve one another in times of need, and just to be with one another. I think about this in terms of worship, and me and Neil have talked about this on the podcast before, but, the call from Scripture is to sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to one another for the building up of the body. And so worship is not, as we sing and stuff, the singing is not like strictly vertical, but it's also horizontal. We're singing to one another. We're testifying to one another through these songs, through these lyrics. And so I think it's a beautiful way that we can serve one another by singing loud on Sundays when we're singing. I'm trying to think of like a song about suffering, perhaps. But even the song we've been doing on Sundays, "Yes, I Will," lift you high in the lowest valley. Like this song about times are tough, but I know you are faithful. And so how deeply is that needed in the ears of the person who's walking through suffering? And maybe you are standing next to someone else at church in the service singing, and they are feeling so weak that day. They can't even bear to sing because they can't handle it. And they're emotionally just worn out. But they hear you singing, and they hear you loud, and they hear you confident in who God is. Or conversely, maybe you're the person who's holding up the other person who has been suffering, and you hear them sing confidently, and the testimony that is in the middle of their very real suffering, it's not hypothetical. It's not just a pretty song. It's not just catchy lyrics, but it's very real in their life. Yet you hear them worshiping and loving Jesus and trusting him with their voice like that, how that ministers to you as well. And so we need each other. Like you said, there's a temptation to isolate. And I think for people who are on the opposite side hearing, there's also that temptation to isolate. Like, I don't have the answers, and it's hard to be around someone who's walking through a hard time because I don't know what to say. So I'd rather, there they are. I'm going to avoid them because they're just going to open up about it, and I feel so awkward. I don't know how to be there for them. They need you, but the reality is that even if they're the ones suffering, you still need them too. And so I just think of music as one way that's very true. So there's your encouragement is Sunday mornings. You don't know what the person next to you is walking through, so sing loud. There you go. That's good.
I like how you're making it. Both parties have something to learn and to grow from.
Absolutely.
The one who's suffering and the one who is not.
Yeah.
They learn from each other. That's a really good point that you're saying there. I like that because that's true. I loved when we sang Oceans on Sunday. I could see some of what you're talking about going on. I don't often get to stand up there when people are singing because I'm down on the floor singing with other people. But then to look at our congregation worshiping together like that was a really special time for me on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, it was great having you up there. It was great having you preach, and I'm thankful that you do that. And I love your particular personality and who you are shines through as you preach. It's really cool. In fact, one of the things I love about when you're preaching is there's like a joy about you. There's in your voice, and I mean the other guys are joyful too. That's not what I'm saying. But even one of the people on the music team were saying he just sounds like he just has a way of like just you feel encouraged hearing him. You feel like he has a way of like, just it feels very joyful. And so I love that about you.
Oh.
You're very genuine.
Thank you.
you have a very genuine way about you. So
there's a lot for us to be joyful about.
Yeah. Well, you model that so well.
It's just,
yeah.
God is amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's Summer Storms, man. That's it.
Yeah, Mark came up with that idea to do that, and I thought it was so good.
It was very
good.
And I think so. I think it's been really good. It's been good for me. And yeah, I trust it's been good for everyone else. So
you too have been through your own storms.
Yeah, we all have. We've all walked through different things, and some of us maybe have the more visceral experience. Some of us have a more intense experience, but we all walk through suffering. You're walking through yours, and we've walked through our fair share. And you even shared a great email that someone sent you on Sunday. You shared that with their permission, and I mean, it just goes to show, like, no one is going to escape from suffering in this life.
No.
And that was, Jesus even promised that, like, hey, in this world, you'll have trouble, but I've overcome the world, so it's going to be okay. And I think it's a beautiful promise that we can hope in, knowing that, he's overcome this, whatever you're walking through, he's overcome that. So we can trust in him. So
yeah,
that's good. Well, thanks for everything on Sunday. And this was a great conversation too. Before we wrap up, let's do this quickly. In 30 seconds, what is, if now you're a very healthy eating person.
I'm getting nervous.
No.
What are you going to say?
You're a very healthy person. So in 30 seconds or less, can you tell me, if health and all of that there were no consequences to what you ate, what would be your ideal breakfast?
Biscuits and gravy.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Ooh, that's a great choice.
I haven't had that in 40 years.
Oh,
probably.
Bob.
I would love to have biscuits and gravy. It's something that I won't allow myself to have because, if I started eating that, it would be very hard for me to stop.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite breakfast foods, biscuits and gravy.
All right.
There it is.
When I get news that you are on your dedeathbed in 50 years, I'm going to come to you with biscuits and gravy and be like, it's time.
Eat these. Yeah.
Oh, man. I got to be honest. I think that's mine too.
Is it really?
I love biscuits and gravy.
From Bob Evans.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
They have the best biscuits and gravy.
Oh, that's great.
That's
really good.
But man, it's a fat bomb.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. We are out of time. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. If you have questions, you can submit them to podcast@hopechristianchurch.com, or you can text them to 440-HOPE-222. Thanks for being here, Bob. This was great.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.